there are already so many ideas in the room. You just there's so much happening. There's something to me about that empathy jacket and the bees with the wedding dress. Just incredible to think about those things side by side, and then we got to hear about both those ideas within this much time. Also, thanks JD for having me, and it's a pleasure to be with people on this panel. I happen to know all of them a little bit, and I had lunch today with Mark, and we were busy talking, and then all of a sudden the talking stopped, and Mark's going like this. He wasn't looking at his watch. There was a little tiny creature that had landed on his arm. And way more interesting than me at that point, completely. And then he very slowly moved his arm over so I could look at it too. This is not my normal way of responding to insects at all. But I entered his world. And I'm grateful for it because he showed me how beautiful it was. He actually called it cute. He said it was a baby. And then off it went. I started my professional life here in Washington. And in those early years, if you would have heard me speak, one of the things I would talk about would go like this. I think there was a time when people danced and the crops grew. I think people danced, and that's how they healed their children. I think people danced as a way to prepare for war, and actually we know this to be true because we know those dances. I think these are really good research questions, don't you think? It would be good to research this. We don't really know. But the one I was particularly thinking about in light of empathy was this one. I think when people were preparing to go for the hunt, they actually danced for days being those animals. And I think they did it as a way of total comprehension and understanding. They might not even have words for it or language or anything, but by becoming what you are not, you find out things you would never know, or you find out things that are essential to your life, as I think they did. It's not an easy thing to become what you're not. In fact, it's so hard that my profession, dance, threw the baby out with the bathwater when modernism came. Just stopped doing it. If you want to make a joke about interpretive dance, all you have to do is say, pretend to be a tree, and everyone will laugh, right? The problem with the sentence, though, it's not being the tree. The problem is the pretending. That's the part that doesn't work. Not being the tree. To become what you're not is life's work, a skill, a series of tools, techniques, and perhaps with additional substances, rituals, all kinds of ways that people put themselves in relationship to the possibility that we could find something out. So I have found, when I began working with scientists around 2001-2, that what was interesting to me, what began to come back into my life as an artist, was actually what we started to call embodied learning. Well, what were the functions of putting things back, partly because of what we've been hearing from the scientists, that actually trying to see what they were doing or trying to feel what they were doing, it was interesting to get into their bodies. But actually, if you want to understand even something as simple as a cell splitting, if you become the cell for an instant, you'll realize we don't really know. It's a miracle what's happening there. It changes the questions, it changes how you think. So I got into thinking about this work with scientists, something like this, from embodied learning at one end of the spectrum to awe and wonder at the other, although they occupy each other. And with that in mind, I thought maybe I would just tell you a couple of stories about some of the work, some of what happened to me in relationship to that work. I'm just going to check my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything. Yes, I did. I mentioned that I think it's hard to do. It's hard to get there, but once you are there, there's something really critical in it, and that's your ability to be open to influence. Like, once you've become this thing you're not, are you just going to but that's not how I think. It's a little bit like what we just saw. It's like, am I going to be open to influence once I see myself the way I was just portrayed, talking about something I would never talk about? It's odd how we think about this. You know, when we think about being open to influence, sometimes I think we call that compromise. Sometimes maybe we think of it as collaboration, I'm not sure, but I think it's such a powerful opportunity. And yet, again, takes skills and behaviors to work on it. I can't go into why I decided to make a piece about genetics. It's a long story. But what I will say is once I thought it would be interesting, and this was just when the human genome was getting sequenced, 2001, 2, like right in that period. I thought, I really want to know about this. And actually, what I said to myself is, I don't know anything about genetics except Gregor Mendel. But if I make a dance about it, by the time I'm done, I'll know something. So I decided to research for about a year before we actually went into the studio. I have a friend at NIH, Irene Ekstrand, and I called her. I said, we're going to be touring some other work. Do you know any scientists in these communities where we're touring? And she did. And they were so incredible, they just opened their doors to us. So one of the first people I met was a man named Stephen Palumbi, who's at Stanford. He's a marine biologist. We got to go into his lab. We spent a lot of time together. And I made several trips out there, again, trying to learn and discover what the questions would actually be in this dance, which eventually was called Ferocious Beauty Genome. One night I was there. He wanted to film. He was doing little microfilms at the time. He wanted to film our conversation under a whale skeleton that's out in Monterey. It was freezing. I know, I always think it's warm out there. It was so cold that night, but there we were under this amazing skeleton. And Stephen tells me a story that altered my understanding of the piece and my understanding of the project. Up till now, I knew in the piece that there was going to be a character. She would be very hip, very cool, a little bit of a loner, really not interested in genetics at all, not really interested in much going on in the world, just about herself. That was the character, and she was going to be one of the main characters in the piece. And the other character was going to be Gregor Mendel. I was interested in the piece having a spiritual guide, which he could be, and a scientific guide, which he could be, and reminding us that at sometimes science and religion were not so far apart as they are now. That much I knew. So what I want to do is show you a little clip from the piece, and then I'll finish the story, because in the clip you'll see how we designed it. You are looking at a performance that includes video. So you're seeing a video of a performance with a video. It's hard to look at that way, but try. And you'll see several scientists, Laura Grable, Laura Lepel, Claire Fraser, and Steve Palumbi, as we sort of discuss these questions. And you'll see this character, Giselle Mason, who's struggling.
When you think about what you got from your mother, you think about the special stuff, the stuff that makes you special, that made her special.
We have so much to learn from everything that's come before. The instructions for how to make us are the same as the instructions for how to make a worm or a fly.
I'm thinking about tracing our evolution back to some of the simplest creatures on Earth.
So where is it written in this skeleton that we have a common ancestor with whales?
To really trace back our ancestry.
It's written right here in this hand, because it has the same kinds of bones as our hands.
That's not all you got. You got the unglamorous parts.
They don't need all these finger bones, but they have them because their ancestors had them.
There are genes called housekeeping genes. They just keep the cell alive. You got those from your mother and your father.
All of that is really packaged in the DNA, and it's inherited from that common ancestor.
I want to know where I came from.
And all mammals have that information.
So is all this stuff about whale hands supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make me go, ooh, ah, or maybe boo-hoo-hoo. As it does it.
So that's a little bit of that. So I don't know how you feel about it, but when Stephen Palumbi told me that we have an ancestor. If you go back far enough, we have the same ancestry as whales. I mean, my entire world changed. So I looked at him, I said, "You're kidding." And he said, "But Liz, that's the definition of a mammal." That's not the definition I got in grade school. Did not get that. So I feel in that moment I had a couple of choices. One was I could feel stupid. One was I could be open to influence and actually open to the awe that that statement brought to me. In the piece, she does eventually find her connection with whales. It is that brings her and us together. But if we really want to think about embodiment, it's not, I mean, it's actually true. Our bodies are connected to whales. So if we were going to be in our embodied selves, you can imagine the potential for our understanding and our connectedness. So that was one story. The first scientist I actually met when I began thinking about this project is a woman named Nancy Wexler. I don't know how some of you may know of her work with Huntington's. She is completely remarkable. And the conversation, we were at an event celebrating the human genome, the place was packed, and I was just saying, what do you think? I'm thinking about doing this dance. And, talk about an empathic moment. I mean, she just, I don't know, something about her face, her whole body changed, and I knew I was on the right track. And she got so excited, and she did what a lot of scientists have done since then, which is to tell me how to choreograph it, which I love. She just said, "Oh, and you could do this, and you could do this, and you could be that." But one thing she said that night is, you could bring the researchers and the families and the ethicists in the room together, because they never are. And giving us sort of a constitution or a compact for how we might say that the concert hall can also be the town hall, that we have a chance to come together in ways not possible. So we actually toured with that those panels sort of popping up in different places. She is working on Huntington's, which is a neurological thing that once your body, the movement of your body completely alters and changes, and it will kill you if you have it. There are not enough people in the United States with that pedigree for her to study. So she had to go to Venezuela, where there are 2 communities, 2 towns that are filled with Huntington's, people with Huntington's. And what she did for us is she gave us her tapes. The tapes, these sort of just random tapes of their work, and said, you can do whatever you want with them. When you look at the tapes, what you see, first of all, she didn't just go down and take the DNA and leave, which was one of the big ethical issues among geneticists at that time. She took water scientists, pediatricians, people dealing with all kinds. She took whole teams of people down there while she worked and connected, and I suppose built a kind of honeycomb around the people of that village, as she also took from them this material she needed to come to terms with what was happening to her family as well as to her science. So you see this, and what you see is Nancy Wexler in the film just holding these people. It's not like your normal trip to the doctor, right? They barely might even, you see them, I'm sorry, they're probably doctors here, but I mean, it's just the idea that you would actually connect that closely with your subject, just so amazing. So that affected the choreography. And the other thing is that we decided to see if we could embody the movement of people with Huntington's, which was its own ethical question, actually, I would say. We began to notice that in art, it's okay to sort of deal with mental illness and occupy that, but to actually occupy the physicality was sort of a whole other thing. So we went frame by frame to try to figure out what that embodiment is. Remember, I said it's really hard. It's hard to do. So we're going to see a clip. The first part of the clip has a little bit of the embodiment practice that sort of opened the scene, and then it jumps to a duet with Martha Whitman and Ted Johnson, who plays Gregor Mendel. And there we took a little poetic license with the movement, because
Just a few more seasons.
tell you the rest. Maybe we can bring the lights down. just today, as I was thinking about this talk, I have an idea about stories that, and history, that it's good to put them in more than one place. Like you file stories in certain places, and if you Xerox or mimeograph the story or copy the story and you put it more than one place, it's interesting what it sits next to. So I've talked a lot about that particular section, these sections of these dances, but I'd never had put them in the context of empathy. And so it got me thinking. Nancy Wexler and Stephen Palumbi are also both activists. In fact, that would be an interesting topic for another Dazer, which is how artists and scientists are handling activism in their lives and their research and how they sort that out. But in this case, both of these folks, and Mark too, and the work that he's been doing that I know about, they really, and my work too, we, in order to do the work we need and must do, we had to push out the boundaries of the profession, which meant pushing against the way the reward systems work and the way it's defined. When I think about empathy, and if I think it's something maybe we want in this world, which I say again, it's a skill, it's a tool, it's a technique, it's a method, it's an outcome. You can make it. You can make it. I mean, we don't just need jackets. I mean, we can do it. Well, we may have to change some of what our professions consider the way we work. Okay.